Heartbreak at the Foster Pavilion. But is this just the beginning of what could be a very special March for Baylor women's basketball? Let's get Locked On Baylor.
You are Locked On Baylor, your daily podcast on the Baylor Bears. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello there, Bears fans. Welcome to another episode of Locked On Baylor, brought to you by FanDuel. I'm your host, Cam Stewart of ESPN Central Texas and The Cam Show on YouTube, Rogue Media Sports Network. Appreciate you making it your first listen today and every day. Of course, we have to recap the heartbreak that was the Baylor TCU women's game yesterday. And oh yeah, I guess the men played too. They played basketball. They're still playing basketball. They finally get off the schneid and get a win. And the star performer, can they get more out of him as the calendar turns to March into the most important games of the season? All that and more coming up on this episode of Locked On Baylor. Damn, man. Damn. That hurts. You really hype up this game, your biggest rival, a chance to, keep the foot down on them. Tell them, hey, this is not your sport. It's still not, but this is a huge win for TCU and a critical loss for Baylor as TCU sweeps the season series. First time they've done that ever against Baylor and win the Big 12 championship on the Foster Pavilion floor. 51-48 is the final. It really goes down to the last gasp there. It was a great environment. It just it wasn't Baylor's day. And to be totally honest with you, I think this Baylor team is really good, but I don't think they're quite as good as TCU. I think TCU is just a little bit better. And I think, and I should say, in this current form, TCU's a little bit better because, you really missed Dariana Little-Page Bugs today. I think you really missed your leading rebounder in this one. They only got out rebounded by 8. It didn't feel like that. It felt like a lot more. And they ended up getting double-digit offensive rebounds. I don't think they had one in the first half. But the common theme I find with this women's team is the game, and it's really been the whole Nicki Collen era, is they've just really struggled to execute down the stretch in these close games. The game just does not slow down for this team when the going gets tough. And I don't know that TCU really executed all that well down the stretch either. They didn't have a field goal the last 4.5 minutes of the game, but the game just got it sped up again for Baylor. And the best example I have of that is in that final minute where it's almost this miraculous comeback. Jada Walker gets the steal, and Yaya Felder tries to then dribble through 2. Starts to slow it up and then tries to go split the defense. And it's like, no, slow down. You don't have a ton of time, but you don't have 5 minutes. You have 50 seconds, though. Let's slow down. And there's just so much of that. And it has been through, there's all kinds of examples. Remember the Kansas State game at home last year where Jada just threw up that prayer with 12 seconds left. It was just weird that the game does not slow down for this team when the going gets tough. And Yaya obviously had a really good game, 17 points. But when you as a team are shooting 28%, I just don't know how you're going to beat anybody of any quality. And I know the women's game is different from the men's game in this sense of how many missed shots, but 18 to 65. Oh. And 17% from 3. When you hold a TCU team to 36%, a team that does a lot of in the 2-point area and in the low block, you should be winning that game, but you can't shoot 28% on the flip side of it. But Baylor still did what they do well. They forced turnovers, they ran out in transition, but this was a game where they really missed Dariana Little-Page Bugs. It was nice to have Bella Fauntleroy in there. Clearly not 100%. She still made some big plays for them. She grabbed 8 rebounds. She drew a couple of charges. I thought the way they defended Haley Van Lith for the whole game was actually pretty good. especially in the first half. Like Jada and Sarah Andrews were really getting after it on the defensive end against Van Lith. And you saw it, I mean, even in the second half too, where they would double. They would bring Nettie up and double the ball. They'd say, basically get it in someone else's hands. And then TCU started hitting some threes. Like that's the mark of like a good team, right? Like they have role players who weren't really doing a lot in the first half, and they did enough in the second half. You know, Big B hits a three. And Nopu, I think is how you say her name, Emma Nopu. She hit a couple of threes in the second half. And like, that's all you need when you've got a player like Van Lith and a player like Sedona Prince, who goes 16 and 19 in this game. If you think she should be playing college basketball as a seventh year, if you think she should be playing this year with all this reports around her, that's another story. But yeah, she's a good player. And really, for most of this game, Aaronette Vonleh couldn't live with her. She gets her double too. But yeah, I think the theme of this game for me was just the execution down the stretch. That fourth quarter was bad offensively, and at one point they were 1 for 14 in the fourth quarter. They end up going where were they in the fourth specifically? 5 of 22 in the fourth quarter. And I think 4 of those came in the last minute plus. Yeah, just it was, the execution was just not good at all down the stretch. And Sarah Andrews goes 0 for 4 in the fourth quarter because she went 0 for 7 in the game. And I've got these broadcasters telling me, I would draw up a play for Sarah Andrews. I'm like, for what? You're down 3. You need a 3. Why am I going to someone who's 0 for 7? The broadcast was a whole different issue. Why? My God. I mean, they didn't get any of the calls that were happening in real time. And then the whole last minute of the game, they're telling us Baylor has no timeouts. I mean, we could see on the score bug, but they're saying Baylor no timeouts. And then miraculously with 10 seconds left, they can call a timeout. It's that was a different part. But you know, I mean, I look at, you know, Jada Walker getting after on the defensive end, but look at the rest of that backcourt. Sarah Andrews, 1 point. Aaliyah Matharu, 1 point. Aaliyah Matharu took 2 shots in this game. That can't happen. Like, this team is bound for, they still have an opportunity to have a lot of success this season and win some championships or hang some banners, if you will. But they've got to execute down the stretch. I look at these last 2 years in which the team was largely the same. And that Virginia Tech game last year, albeit in the tournament on the road, very impressive, was the only one I remember being like, hell yeah, this team closed it out and showed them who was boss. But other than that, in these close games, they really, really struggle. And they're going to need to fix that because they've got a good team makeup. They've got a good coach. They've got a heck of a lot of talent. They should be making a deep run in this March Madness tournament coming up. But it's got to get better down the stretch. And that's a tough way to start it, losing the Big 12 championship on your home floor. I turned it right off as the clock hit zeros. There's no way I'm watching that trophy ceremony. I mean, it's congrats to TCU, man. They played a good game. It is wild how, one last thought here, because I'm going over time. It is wild how in the men's game, we are so into, you know, having a deep bench and having, you know, consistent role players who can score, and, you know, everyone on the floor needs to be able to score. And yet here in the women's game, you look at a team like TCU, I talk about, they had players who hit shots like down the stretch. It was 1 or 2, but they don't have a threat outside Van Lith and Sedona Prince. They just don't. I think Baylor's better in that category, but this is kind of to the greater point here. TCU went on Baylor's home floor and beat them in a championship game with having really 2 bucket getters, you know? So it's interesting to see that Baylor actually has a deeper team, but TCU as better at the top with Van Lith and Sedona Prince. So they deserved it. Anyway, let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. Be sure to like and subscribe. Helps out the channel a ton. You can also find us, of course, wherever you find your podcast. We're rolling on because the men did play basketball this weekend. We'll talk about that next on Locked On Baylor. Attention, Locked On Baylor fans. Ever wish you could directly support your favorite athletes and be a part of their journey? Well, now you can with Roy, the NIL app that puts fans in control. Before Roy, NIL deals used to be handled behind closed doors, right? Fans like us didn't have a clear way to directly support the players that we love. Well, now with Roy, you can make a real impact and feel closer to the athletes that are representing Baylor. With Roy, you get to choose the player you want to support, decide how much you want to contribute, and get exclusive content straight from the athletes that you back. Best part about it, if your player transfers, you get your money back. So it's a risk-free way to show your support and make your voice heard. Support your favorite players directly and help shape the future of Baylor athletics. Download the Roy app now from the App Store and start backing Baylor athletes the way they deserve with transparency, trust, and real impact. This is the future of college sports. Join it now by downloading Roy and supporting your favorite players. And believe it or not, there was another basketball game this weekend at Foster Pavilion. It didn't have the hype that the women's game had yesterday. It didn't have the championship aspirations that the women's game had yesterday, but it was very important, right? It was very much a must-win scenario for the Baylor men's team as they took on Oklahoma State on their senior day on Saturday. I think good move by Baylor Athletics, by the way, to make this game senior day against Oklahoma State rather than the actual last home game of the season, which is against Houston. I think that's a good move. I think that's a good move by the athletic department and by men's basketball. Top notch, truly. And they needed a big comeback to beat UT last year on their senior day. They needed a bit of a comeback against Oklahoma State in this one. They were down 10 at one point, but it was early. And they really had a great kind of middle eight. We used to talk about with Matt Rule on the football side. The last couple of minutes of the first half, the first couple of minutes of the second half, Baylor kind of put the thing away. I know Oklahoma State had some jabs. They kind of got back into it, but Baylor was able to kind of see it out towards the end of the game. I think at one point Oklahoma State got it to 3. Am I right in saying that? And then it was I think back-to-back threes by Baylor. But what I'm impressed by, and I'll get to the obvious player of the game in a second here. What I was impressed by with Baylor was I've talked about through this losing streak and really through most of the last month and a half of how many things need to go right for them to win a game, right? Like you need VJ to be in double figures. You need Norchad to have a double-double and a pretty impressive one. Like you need Rob Wright to be facilitating and scoring at the rim. And they only got one of those things. Norchad with a double-double, 10 and 13. I thought he played well. It wasn't one of those, we know he's capable of like an 18 and 14. It wasn't one of those, but I thought Norchad played really well in this game on Saturday. VJ just didn't have it. Did not have it going offensively. He hits that one field goal, which was the breakaway layup on a nice defensive play too. And Rob Wright continues his really poor shooting form the last couple of games. He's 5 of 14 from the floor, and 0 of 5 from 3. And to see that you didn't have those things, you didn't have a big Rob Wright game, you didn't have a big VJ Edgecombe game. You didn't go, absolutely stupid on the glass, but you were +8 on the glass. That's pretty good. To have those things in there and to win a game, no matter who it's against in this conference, I think is a good thing. And some of you will see this as Debbie Downer. I'm very happy that Baylor won, and I know we all are. But boy, did that feel like a chore to watch on Saturday? Nothing to do with like Baylor blowing chances or anything. It was just not great basketball. It wasn't the beautiful game. It was what a lot of the country thinks the Big 12 looks like. You had two teams that shot under 40%. Oklahoma State 19 of 49, Baylor 22 of 59. 2 of 14 from 3 for the Pokes, 8 of 30 for Baylor. Like it was just not sloppy. Both teams over 15 turnovers. It was just not a great advertisement for Big 12 basketball. I'll say that. But I like the way Baylor closed it out, 6 of the last 8. field goals, which we know is something that even when they've been good the last couple, or really last year, they would struggle with closing out games and hitting field goals at the end of games and finding shots at the end of games. And Baylor was able to get out and transition a lot in this game, and specifically towards the end of it to kind of get it done. But big tip of the cap to the guys who stepped up, and the biggest one obviously is Jeremy Roach. He was for sure the player of the game in this one. Led all scorers with 21, 8 of 17 from the floor, 4 of 7 from 3. Like he went nuclear. And I almost stopped making that an option a few games ago. You remember I was saying well, if Baylor has one or two guys that just goes nuts, or maybe they go nuclear from 3, then they can cover up a lot of these ills here. And they didn't have that, to the point where I said, okay, I'm not saying that anymore because it's not going to happen. Jeremy Roach gave you one. His best game as a Bear, I think. The St. John's game was pretty good. He obviously had the buzzer beater in that one too. But I thought he was getting after it defensively, which has not been the case for him most of the year. And he was more than efficient from 3. You're not going to get many 4 or 7s from 3 out of him. But if you can get games where he hits 3 threes, even if it's 3 of 8, that's a pretty good spot to be living. That's a 35% clip, and it's one of those where you don't like missing 5 threes, but you can't say no to the 3 threes that he hits. Am I making sense there? It's like that side job that really shouldn't be worth your time because of the money you're getting paid, but you don't make much money anywhere, so you can't turn it down. That's what Jeremy Roach is from the 3-point line. He's not going to have many games like this, but if he can give you 3 or 4, you'll take 5 misses, 6 misses if he's going to give you 3 or 4 threes. So I mean, it took till March, but maybe that's what this is. Maybe he is a March player. He wasn't necessarily that way at Duke, but he did get to a Final Four at Duke, so maybe he was just saving the best for last, huh? Because I just think it's so important to note that all these guys who didn't have good days, right? Edgecombe, Langston Love, took 3 shots the whole game, didn't make a single one. Jalen Celestine didn't have a great one. That Jeremy Roach could step up, and that Jaden Nunn could step up. Speaking of a 3 of 8, he was 3 for 8 from 3. Again, you'll take that, man. That's 40%. That's where you want him to be. And he gets to double figures for the first time in forever. How much have we been talking about, what Jaden Nunn has not given you this year? I expected him to be one of their best scorers coming into this year. In fact, I wouldn't have been shocked if he was the leading scorer on this team when it was all said and done, just because of how confident I felt he could be from beyond the arc. It wasn't that long ago. He scored 10 against Arizona, but it's been pretty few and far between, and it's usually when he hits a couple of threes towards the end of the game. He has not had a game of more than 15 points since ACU on December 9th. So to have those guys step up when you need them, when this was a huge game for you, that's good enough for me, I guess is what I'm saying. It's March, and we could have used this for a couple other big wins, and Oklahoma State's bad. They're really not good, but a win is a win. You will take it at this point. And it might have just helped Baylor save their NCAA tournament hopes. We'll tell you what those hopes look like coming up next on Locked On Baylor. But first, a message from our friends over at FanDuel. You might know it as America's #1 sportsbook. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started. And there's no better place to get in on it than with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because with FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game. So even if you miss that opening tap, or you want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in the action all game long. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, might I introduce you to combining your live bets into a same game parlay. I love using their live betting feature. It keeps every moment of the game exciting, no matter what the game looks like. And the app, it's easy to use, so easy that I can use it. And when you win, you get paid instantly. I love that too. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. So the Bears get the win over Oklahoma State on Saturday. The women's team, we know they're going to the tournament, right? We know they're in a pretty good spot, right? But the men, they were playing their way out of the 68 team field the last few weeks here, with their losing streak that hit 4 before beating Oklahoma State. They went from a team that was guaranteed, basically. Lenardi had them at 97% to make the tournament, to under 90 last week on the bubble as a 10 seed, and just desperate for a win, no matter what it took to get there. And they get it done. They squeak it out. They win by 10 against Oklahoma State. And now on the bubble watch, unofficially from Lenardi on Sunday afternoon, he's got Baylor as one of the last 4 buys, which means probably a 10 seed, maybe an 11. Could even be a 12, because 11, like the 11s, 2 of the 11s would be playing games, so it technically could be a 12. But I doubt they drop from 10 to 12 after a win, even though it is against it's a quad 3 win, I guess, against Oklahoma State. But that at least gives them some breathing room. Because if you lost this game, you were probably out of the picture entirely. And bracketology, Joe Lenardi has 8 Big 12 teams in right now. And by the way, not great news for Baylor. One of your early season wins, what looked like an impressive win at the time, was Arkansas. And they are now trending in the wrong direction. They're one of the last 4 in. 3 of the last 4 in are SEC teams, by the way. Boy, do they love that SEC this year. And Arkansas trending down right now, clinging to a spot. They just got, 30-piece waxed by the worst team in the SEC. That was awful. And so no Big 12 teams in the last 4 in, none in the first 4 out, and none in the next 4. Or excuse me, Cincinnati is in the next 4 out. And then the next outside of that has TCU as well. So maybe not quite the respect that the Big 12 has had in years past, but still 8 teams. Like that's still pretty good. And Cincinnati kind of is in somewhere in that picture because they just beat Baylor a few games ago. So that's how they get there. But it is paramount. All these games have huge importance for Baylor the last couple of games of the season. Now, if they had just taken care of business the last few weeks and didn't have the losing streak they had, you were basically playing with house money these last 2 games, right? Like you're not going to win the Big 12, but you're also probably not going to fall out of the picture. Well, now that's changed. And you want to talk about a massive one you had on Saturday. How about this one you got tomorrow? In Fort Worth against TCU, 7 p.m. Because then your next game is at home to Houston. You're probably not winning that game, even though Houston has it locked up, actually. So maybe you can. TCU on the road. Baylor's won there the last couple of years, but they have struggled. They've split each of the last 3 years with TCU, which is not great because Baylor's had some good teams. TCU's had some okay teams. And this time, Baylor's mediocre and TCU's bad. TCU's not a good team, but you've already lost to them this year. This needs to be a tournament game for you, not a Big 12 tournament game. Don't want to get that twisted because then Baylor will lose. Treat this like an NCAA tournament game, first round, because it's that important to your season. If you go into Kansas City on a 2-game losing streak after what you just had, and, Lenardi looks at this going into the conference tournament and says, well, you know what? They've lost 6 of their last 7, and the only win was against a bad Oklahoma State team at home. That changes a lot of things. So, and it might force you in a position where you need to win a game or 2 in Kansas City, which is something Baylor is not good at. They've never been good at it. I don't expect that to change with this team. I hope I'm wrong. But these two games are massive. And of course, we'll take a look at, what this TCU game means a little bit on the show tomorrow, and knock on wood, they get that done, because you're in a weird scenario with Houston coming into your own barn on Saturday. If you don't beat TCU, it's going to be pins and needles, white knuckling this thing right till the end of the season. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. Is this team going to make the tournament and we're all just, about to pass out for nothing? What did you think of the performance on Saturday? Could they get this Jeremy Roach going forward, and how huge would that be? Oh boy, would that be huge. And let me know what you thought about the women's game. Let me know in the comments below where these teams can go in the tournament. And I don't know, tell me your favorite sandwich. Let me know in the comments below. Be sure to like and subscribe. Helps out the channel a lot. You can also find us wherever you find your podcast. Thank you for making it your first listen today and every day. And we will see you later on Locked On Baylor.